Hello and welcome everyone back to our Secular Buddhist Essentials class. It's another beautiful Sunday. Today's an exciting class. It's going to be our last class of our summer program. Um, and we'll be taking a break. Over the summer, we'll be digging into our Skillful Living program. So what we'll do is we're going to come back to Secular Buddhist Essentials in the fall and continue working on it. It's also a really convenient time because in the chapter we've been working on for a while here, this chapter is basically what the Buddha taught, and more particularly, this is our true nature. We started this chapter with a title called "What We Are According to Buddhism," and since we've been studying through all this material and winding back again, I wanted to revisit this question now that we have a much deeper understanding of the Buddha's teachings. So that's what I'm going to present. And I probably already say that in the document. And this document will be available to everybody after class. So again, what we are according to Buddhism revisited. At least that's the working title. So we'll see. So again, after learning about ourselves throughout the chapter, I once again want to address and clarify the Buddhist perspective of what we are, but this time from a more elevated perspective, um, through what we've gained through our studies in these last lessons. We began this chapter by sharing that the Buddha shared a remarkable, empowering vision of the human condition, emphasizing our unique potential for transformation and liberation, that that human life is a precious blessing and a rare opportunity, possessing a potential to become sublimely noble beings of heart and mind. I love that line. It's from the sutras, translated, of course. Sublimely noble beings of heart and mind. He praised our innate capacity for kindness, compassion, and generosity, and our inherent open and tender hearts, while conversely, uh, regarding our primal impulses as low, vulgar, ignoble, and beneath us. The Buddha asserted our true nature as bright, clear, luminous, radiant, and innately capable of perfection. However, for most of us, this true nature is obscured by afflictions that prevent us from realizing and experiencing our higher potential for awakening. We also shared that most of us tend to think of ourselves as static objects existing in a somewhat fixed and isolated manner. However, when examined, we find that we are instead dynamic living processes existing in a state of constant change, being more akin to flowing rivers than static entities. But there is a kind of a paradox here. While apparently existing as unique, self contained entities, right? I'm Tarpa. Wherever I go, Tarpa goes. My experiences go with me. But when examined closer, we find that we don't exist in isolation, but instead are deeply interconnected and influenced by our environments. As mentioned, there are various terms for these living processes that we are, terms like person, being, entities, living beings, or my preferred term, sentient beings. Regardless of the term, all of these labels point to a dynamic, ever changing psychophysical organism composed of an interwoven assembly of parts and processes and functions. So, with that said, What aspects should we actually identify with as ourselves? Conventionally, we see ourselves as a self, understood as a conceptual identity, label, and mental interface that functions as a lens and vantage point through which we interpret the world. An interface that allows us to coordinate the complex workings of our mind body system within its environment. Conventionally, the self can be understood as a karmic agent, that which initiates action and experiences their results. But in Buddhism, even conventionally, we know that we're not this self. We understand that the self is merely a functional concept. From the ultimate view, Buddhism asserts that there's no owner or internal controller of ourselves or our experiences. Instead, we're products of complex causal web of interrelated processes and events. And yet, we're not passive bystanders driven by blind forces. Our control lies in our ability to wisely direct our ethical, intentional choices or karma, through which we have the potential to become masters of our destiny. Ultimately, our aim is to transcend the need to tether ourselves to identity of any kind. To do this is to abide in a profound, expansive state beyond bondage and clinging to any ego identity. Even though we've analytically deconstructed the self, that doesn't mean that the conventional self isn't effective and essential for navigating life. It remains as an effective mental interface that helps to direct our energy and efforts towards our aims while interacting and communicating effectively with our environment. The ultimate view of self never negates the conventional view of self or its existence. It simply offers a more penetrating understanding. The conventional view is true. It doesn't disappear or become irrelevant when we examine ourselves deeper. Yes, at an ultimate level of understanding, we exist as streams of consciousness. Yet these streams have faces, personalities, names, bodies, minds. These streams have families and friends, and hopes and dreams. They experience care and affection, and joy and love. They have intelligence, creativity, and purpose, existing in a constant struggle against causes, conditions, and afflictions. I think maybe it came off very technical. Do you think it was too technical? You know, the presentations I'm sharing on these Sundays, they're kind of first takes, and eventually, when things get to the book itself, um, they could be slightly different. What do you think? Was this a bit technical? After understanding, oh, Rutha, thank you. My thought was after understanding all these weeks of classes, maybe especially the vocabulary becomes a bit more comfortable for everyone. Does anybody have any questions about that? What do you guys think about some of these ideas? I think probably the scariest one out of all of these is the idea that, or let's say, well, ultimately it's just so paradoxical that Buddhism asserts that there's no controller or person in charge of us, right? They call it the ghost in the machine. That there's we have this idea that we're behind our eyes looking out into the world, controlling everything. And the idea that that's an illusion, it's kind of can be unsettling for a lot of people. And yet somehow we're not just passive victims. We do have control, we just have control in a different way. Miss Rula, please.
Yes, I wanted to know that when we are into afflictions and things like that, and we want to express a better potential, then who is deciding this?
The process itself is deciding it, and it chooses mindfulness. Mindfulness is the tool for moving away from that habitual behavior, those afflictions. So the idea is that choices happen here,
Yeah.
decisions happen here. So the idea is getting rid of the pronoun I.
Ah, okay.
I choose, I do this. The process itself
Mm.
chooses, right?
Okay.
There's not a single controller. Again, like we mentioned, it's kind of more like the commune, right?
Mm, yeah.
These different processes, they all take part in it. So maybe an easy way to understand is to understand how important the uh, mental factors are. So some of the mental factors, like most important, well, mindfulness is a mental factor, right? And what we mean by mental factors, we're often talking about functions, but we can't call them mental functions because they're not all functions. A great deal of the mental factors are characteristics of the mind. So I think it's a good term to use to call them factors. So they're aspects of the mind, some functions, some characteristics. But a lot of these functions, one of them is mindfulness, the other one is wisdom. So now both of those have a role, but they're separate mental functions that work together, right? Mind or wisdom helps us to apply mindfulness properly. And the same with volition is also a mental factor, right? The act of choice, which means karma as well. So this process, they all have different roles and they all come together to decide on what we're going to do. What we have control over is the direction. Is through mindfulness and wisdom, we can choose to move in a positive direction instead of an afflicted direction. That's according to the early sutras. We have the ability to move towards the three wholesome roots and away from the three unwholesome roots. And then that sounds kind of analytical. It sounds distant. But remember, what we're talking about is that choice is in every decision. So every decision that comes up, you have sway over that decision. So on one side, you have all this conditioned behavior, social behavior, habits telling you should do it this way, right? And that means like all your friends and family, they would choose it this way. That's all there, right? But then we have free will, right? According to Buddhism, we have agency, and agency is in some ways is the very heart of the whole Buddhist path. And so we can choose to act counter or contrary to our social conditioning, our habits. And in that single moment of choice, that's where our freedom and control lies. We can influence that. We can choose differently. But we are truly beings of habit. Human beings are beings of habit. All the choices that come up from prior experience, prior thing. But at that very moment of choice, that's where our freedom is. That's where our choices are. I hope I explained that well. Yeah. And how about some of these other topics? Are you all so comfortable with them that you're I love the way the Buddha talks about human beings and our potential. It seems like that's lost so much in Dharma teachings. Dharma teachings, we get right into our afflictions, our suffering, of course, for obvious reasons. I mean, that's what we have to understand and work with in order to liberate ourselves. But at the same time, I think it's important to understand these beautiful beings that we are. What do you think about, we talk about we exist as subtle streams of consciousness. That sounds very ethereal, doesn't it? Like we're all living lives as like whispers on a breeze. But then to realize, well, when they talk about subtle streams of consciousness, those streams have faces. I mean, we're talking about you. They have personalities. They have likes and dislikes. Some are really funny. Some are serious. They're capable of love and affection and creativity and brilliance, So I think it's important to pull the idea of this subtle stream of consciousness out of the abstract and really make it clear we're talking about you. We're not talking about some invisible consciousness drifting through the air. This subtle stream of consciousness that is Rula is her right there. That's the face of her subtle stream of consciousness. And all the wonderful things about her exist. They're all there, right? It's just a question of kind of what's behind it all. Oh, Rula, another question?
Yes. So is it right to say that the stream of consciousness itself chooses?
No. What we don't want to do is we don't want to pin it down to one thing.
Uh,
See, now that's the human um desire. We always want to break everything down to a single thing.
yeah,
And that is useful, right? When we're trying to understand things. Um, Even the Buddhist teachings, you'll often hear teachers say, this is the most important thing in Buddhism. Here, this is everything. And it's actually, especially in Buddhism, it's just not true. Buddhism can't be broken down to a single thing. Uh, it's holistic,
yeah.
we can break things down to the threefold path. But and so the idea is to try to assert um, a single identity or single controller is the biggest mistake in understanding any of this. So every time you come down to it, what people always want to say, what is us, right? And then nowadays, the modern view that's very popular is that we're the awareness that's watching, right? We're the watcher. We're the awareness that watches ourselves think and watches our and Buddhism says, oh no, that's not true. That awareness is a function of the mind, but it's not who we are. It's not some kind of controller. It's just a function of the mind. And so the stream of consciousness is the process itself, right? The mental continuum. And all of those functions are inside there, but none of those things inside there as well. Oh, we used a great analogy a couple of weeks ago. It's like asking which planet is the universe? Seems like a crazy question, right? What planet? You say, oh, there isn't. The universe isn't one planet. The universe is everything. It's the same thing. There isn't one thing inside us that's in charge. It's a process, and the whole process works together to experience the world and act in the world in the way we think it does. But you could imagine why the mind creates the self, because what a much simpler interface with our environment, right? When we just say, oh, me, I'll call this whole process one thing and it'll just be me. And so that makes a lot of sense. David?
Um, yes, Tarpa. I can't quite understand how we are all subtle streams of consciousness if we're also everything. Like I'm looking at you, your face. Well, your face is part of you, but it's not a stream of consciousness. It's a physical entity.
Sure. Um, it's just a question of how we want to label this process. So this process has a face, has a body, has a mind. In Buddhism, and maybe I should be clearer about this, it's more of the ultimately, especially with possessing a belief in rebirth, that each body and mind in each lifetime come and go, but the stream of consciousness is what carries through all of it. And so they Buddhism likes to call this organism that we are. They like to refer to it as a stream of consciousness.
But that runs contrary to what you were saying, does it not? That we are the whole thing.
Yeah, even to identify with the whole thing is considered a mistake. We are this process, but this process is so dependent on everything around us as well. The idea of Buddhism is to move away from that identity. Actually, I have a bit of this in the summary, and maybe I should have mentioned it earlier in the piece. Let me uh, let me get to that part, and then we'll look at the question again, David. I think I
Okay.
explain it in the next part. Kempo, please, sure.
Yeah. So, in my understanding, there are two types of understanding of this thing. One is intellectual understanding, what we are kind of doing now, and there is experiential understanding that is experienced through insight or through deep meditation. That
Sure.
is just appearing um, in your awareness that that's how it is.
Yeah, we have conceptual understanding and direct experience.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
So you're right. We can experience things in both ways. And your question?
Uh, just wanted to run.
Oh, yeah. And so the conceptual understanding is what we're dealing with right now. We're talking about it, we're sharing it, we're trying to wrap our heads around it. That comes first. And then the hope is that once that becomes um, habituated in our minds and we're comfortable with it, then you can actually get a direct experience of it in meditation. And it starts out with just getting some glimpse. You might start to just get glimpses of in your behavior and how you realize how much of your behavior you're not really choosing, right? You start to have little glimpses like that, and more you start to understand that. You understand the process. You start to understand where your control actually lies. And as you master the process, it becomes clearer. Thank you, Kimball. Tough question. Okay, I want to share this last bit, and maybe I did maybe some of this I shouldn't have saved for the ending. So, for summary, the practitioner with no belief in rebirth, for the practitioner with no belief in rebirth, we exist as living processes composed of mind and body and nothing more. Meaning, we can simply identify with the five aggregates existing within one lifetime, right? That's for someone without a belief in rebirth. Um, Alternatively, for those who have a belief in rebirth, we exist as subtle streams of consciousness passing from lifetime to lifetime. But in both cases, we must keep in mind that the more we can transcend our clinging to any and all forms of identity, the closer we move to liberation and awakening. It's perfectly acceptable and necessary within everyday life to operate from the conventional view of self, using common pronouns like I, me, my, you, or we. The Buddhist view of what we are might seem radical, but it doesn't change who you are. It merely explains it. In the end, you're still the person you've always been. So, David, yeah, I think I should have saved. I think I should save the part of subtle streams of consciousness for the ultimate view. And maybe I did or maybe I didn't. I'll look that over. I'm not sure if I mentioned it in the conventional, but that's the difference between the two. So according to your question, uh, within a single lifetime, this is who we are. We're the five aggregates, which are mind and body, our faces, our personalities, the whole thing. So that's the conventional view, or that's the conventional view of a person who doesn't believe in rebirth. For those people that believe in rebirth, the idea is that we're actually this subtle stream of consciousness that goes moment to moment, lifetime to lifetime. And then each time we're born, we get a new set of aggregates, a new set of mind and body. The Buddha talked about it as being like a person wandering from village to village, in which he's a different person in each village, right? So there's this continuity that flows through it all, but identity and mind and body continually change. And then the big question always comes up, well, isn't that continuity like a soul? And the idea is the way Buddhism asserts it, as that um, the a consciousness is just goes from one conscious moment to the next, right? There's it's a process that continues to reinitialize itself over and over and over again. So they assert that it's not really a single flowing thing, although it appears that way. What it actually is these moments of consciousness. Each moment of consciousness um, gives its information to the next moment of consciousness. But between the two, they're not the same consciousness. Each moment of consciousness gives birth to the next. So that's why they refer to it as a process instead. Maybe an example is the one of the candle flame. So you have a candle and a flame, and you touch another candle to it, and then it ignites. The idea is that it's not the same candle. It's that the heat and the warmth of the initial candle, the conditions were right here for that candle to take root in another place, that flame to take root in another place. And they assert that it's not the same flame, but it is from kind of the same source. And I'm not sure I'm explaining it great. David, please. You're muted.
Yeah, I can't agree with that. But even if I could, that would make then the flame which transmutes the soul.
Another way to look at it, yeah, I'm not so sure. I like a lot of their analogies. Another one that is pretty good is a fire, a spark from a fire that gets propelled out into a field and starts another fire. And the idea is that It's not the same fire, but the causes and conditions were there so that the fire could reestablish itself in another place. But Buddhism makes it clear that we shouldn't think about it as being the same consciousness. It's just consciousness reestablishing itself in the next host. And a very difficult topic to get our minds around. But it's not supposed to be taken as like a transference, like the person or the consciousness is just picked up and set there. It's more that the conditions are there for that consciousness to reestablish itself. And if you remember, consciousness is it's a different consciousness in every moment. So the idea is that it's a different consciousness that takes root in the next host. It's not the same, but it does have a lot of the characteristics, and it does work as a vehicle for subtle karmic and mental imprints as well. And I'd like to say, I'm not asking anyone to believe it. I'm just sharing the Buddhist model. This is how the sutras assert it. This is how the Buddha shared it. Difficult topic. And so that's all I'm trying to do here. Good. But I agree with you that this is like we talked about, this is a radical presentation of the way we exist. So you might ask yourself, well, how does this benefit my life? In this text, we've defined awakening as understanding the true nature of ourselves and reality, or traditionally expressed as knowing and seeing things as they truly are. This understanding is what liberates us from common mundane existence and the clinging, struggle, and suffering that existence entails. Through slowly coming to terms with this unique understanding of ourselves and reality, we cultivate and ultimately attain the open and expansive state of awareness, of awakening, the state beyond identity, the state beyond suffering. So again, through understanding this, we ultimately attain the open and expansive state of awakening, the state beyond identity, the state beyond suffering. So I think a lot of times in presentations of the Dharma, people don't talk much about wanting to transcend identity of any kind. That's in the sutras. The Buddha says it himself. But I'm kind of surprised that we don't hear about that more. Can you imagine a state where you kind of lose your identity? Imagine that you're meditating and you just start letting go of stuff, all your wants, all your desires, all your worries. And more you just keep letting go of all these things that you're tied to. Imagine if you had the power to just set them aside in your mind. You set aside your work, you set aside your family, your occupation, your skills, your talents, friends, and you just keep setting them all aside until all of those aspects of identity are gone. Imagine what kind of state of mind that would be, how expansive that would be, right? Kind of an extraordinary thought, isn't it? Miss Rula?
I don't remember which aggregate it was, but there is that aggregate where we have all our patterns and all our ways.
Volition?
Volition, yeah.
Yes, the fourth,
Yeah.
the fourth.
Can this one be identity?
No, no, identity is created by all five. All the aggregates together form self or identity. But
Because I have,
there is a strong element of it in the fourth. If I was
okay,
going to point to one to be the strongest, it would be.
okay.
Fourth is probably the strongest out of all of them.
Because I tend to imagine that the first three, and I mean, not the body, but the other ones, are the same for everyone, but not the volition.
Oh, I think they're all unique to each one of us. Um, the physical body, which is the first, feeling,
Yeah,
which is
yeah,
second, third is perceptions.
yeah,
They're all quite unique, but a lot of personality traits.
yeah.
No, I would agree with you. Another reason is because most of the mental factors are in the fourth,
Okay.
but three of the five aggregates are mental factors as well. So yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, the mental factors are basically what we think of as ourselves.
Yeah.
Those are all our qualities. Those are all of our functions. Yeah. Oh, I think it's a tough topic. I thought I did a pretty good job on it, but I think I have to do a little rewrite on it. I thought it was a bit wordy too. I think I'd like to simplify it a bunch. But it is quite something to wrap our heads around, huh? We learned about all these things separately, but when you put them all together, I think to reiterate an important thing David brought up is the idea of this identifying as a stream of consciousness. So even the stream of consciousness, the Buddha tells us we shouldn't identify with, but kind of gives the idea like if you're going to identify with one, that's it. The mental continuum, the subtle stream of consciousness. But I think that that's only important for people that believe in rebirth. I think people uh, that don't, I think that that's a concept that really equates to the principles of rebirth and probably isn't a concept that any of them need. But we have people that believe in all sorts of things. So we try to cater to everybody. Oh, you wore me out. I'm tired. Any last questions? You're all experts. Shiva, please.
I was thinking about the analogy which Mr. David brought up, like the candle burning, and is it like a soul which is even if you think of, I just thought about it a bit. If you think about the candle burning, like the flame itself is just burning, and even within the same candle, at no two moments it's the same flame because it's not the same fuel that's burning, it's not the same thread that's burning. So even though it's just an analogy, yeah, even the flame transferring to a new candle, it's like can be seen as like a process, and instead of something innate.
Thank you. And now that you say it, that's exactly the rationale they use in the sutras. That the reason it's not a soul is because the flame is a process. It's the burning. It's not an entity. It's a process. And then I shared the one in our class of the seed in the field, that it's like a seed being committed and reestablishing another field. But the problem with that is that the seed itself is something kind of physical, right? It's like imagining that there is something there. So the hardest thing to get our minds around is the idea is that nothing substantial is reestablished. As Bhikkhu Bodhi told me, he says, it's only a process, not an entity. There is no entity that is reborn. And it's the same thing when we look at consciousness moment to moment, right? The idea that it's never the same consciousness at any moment. It's a process. Yes, there's similarities, but it is different at every moment. So like the candle flame, consciousness exists because the conditions are appropriate for it. It's a process. And I agree, it's hard for myself to get my mind around it, right? So we just keep trying. Wonderful. Hey, this is the last class for the summer programs. I'm very excited, very pleased to share it with all of you. When we come back in the fall, we're going to be moving on to our next topic. So this chapter was about the true nature of ourselves, and I was trying to get everybody to understand the subject. This is what we're dealing with. Our next chapter is going to be on the true nature of phenomena. And we're going to start talking about how things in the world exist. From there, we're going to talk about how we engage with phenomena and reality. So I think it's a pretty interesting outline that we're following. Okay, with that said, why don't we end today's class with our altruistic affirmation? May all be healthy, may all be prosperous, may all be well, may all be present, free of past regret and future worry. May all abide in constant appreciation, which is the source of great joy and contentment. May all realize their true nature and the true nature of reality, which is awakening. Thanks, everybody, for joining me. It was such a pleasure to share it with everybody. Thank you for your awesome questions. See you later. Bye-bye.
Thank you
Thank
very
you,
much.
Tarpa.
Thank you.